And today we want to welcome Morris Scott, who has done a training previously for our Plaintiff PA staff, and he was fabulous. So we wanted to invite him to speak to all of you. Morris is a staff attorney at Disability Rights PA, which is an organization whose mission is to protect and advocate for the rights of people with disabilities. Disability Rights PA works to ensure that people with disabilities may live the lives they choose, free from abuse, neglect, discrimination, and segregation. From everything that we've seen, Morris is an experienced advocate who has dedicated his career to fighting for the rights of the disability community. And we're very grateful to have him here today sharing his expertise. And Melanie will be clicking through the slides, so you can just give her a shout when you need to move on. But I'm going to hand it off to you. Thanks for being here.
Thank you very much, Christine, and thank you to Melanie for the invite. I'm certainly really happy to be here again. My name is Morris Scott from Disability Rights Pennsylvania. And I'm just here to give a presentation on disability rights, to share some information, to share some resources, but really to focus a lot on emergency preparedness. It's certainly a relevant subject today. Just to let you know a little bit more about myself, I am a staff attorney at DRP. I've been licensed since 1999 in Pennsylvania. I'm also licensed in New Jersey. I'm admitted to the Eastern, Middle, and Western United States District Court, and recently admitted to the Third Circuit Court as well. The work that I do at DRP, in addition to intake cases, I also work in the area of litigation, special education, housing as well, housing issues as well. Now, disability rights is a very vast, very large area of law. I certainly can't cover it all today. I certainly don't know it all. But I think that perhaps this presentation is just designed to start the conversation, to raise the issues, to introduce you to the issues, and certainly provide some resources for you to access further information. Again, I have to give the warning that this is not legal advice, even as we entertain certain questions at the end. I certainly can't give legal advice, but general information. And the reason why is that if you're going to provide legal advice, you want to have sufficient facts in order to provide the appropriate information. And so this is just not the forum to do that. Okay, so I think we can go to our next slide. And the question then is, what is disability rights, and why is disability rights so important? Why is it relevant? It's relevant whether or not you have a disability or not. Because you might know someone who actually has a disability. You might know someone who actually needs help, and they might come to you and ask you questions. For example, a person's disability benefits could suddenly be cut off for no reason at all. They might come to you and say, "What do you think I should do?" A person might have, like a case that we had, a service animal, and they're denied entrance into a restaurant. What should they do? A person could have a disability and they need assistance with transportation issues. What should they do? A person could get, this is a really good one, a person could get stopped by a police, but they're not able, because of their disability, to respond to the police. And the question is, what should they do in that circumstance? In a public emergency now, we're really focusing on emergency preparedness. In a public emergency, a person might need assistance in a shelter, maybe assistance from a healthcare institution. The question is, what should they do, and how can they get in contact or access those resources? What I think is important for us to realize is that you don't have to know everything. You don't have to know everything, but you can know where to actually access the information. And so I'd like to bring to your attention some assistance that's available. I believe, as we all do, that knowledge is important, and the lack of knowledge can be very detrimental to one's health, to receiving the necessary help. So then the question is, as we go to our next slide, the question then is, what is Disability Rights Pennsylvania? As you can see from the slides there, it says public interest law firm. Public interest means that we serve the public. We're not serving any private, we're not serving for private gain. That's not our goal. We are a 501(c)(3). We are a nonprofit. We're exempt from paying taxes because of our service to the public and our mission. We are independent. We're not a government organization or agency. We do get funding now. We get funding on various levels, but we're not an organization or a government organization or agency. We operate throughout the entire Commonwealth of Pennsylvania. We have offices in Philadelphia, Harrisburg, Pittsburgh as well. We are federally mandated. That's very important, as we're going to see in a few moments. We're federally mandated. I don't think I have the statute on the slide, but it's for those of you that might want to know the statute. It's 42 USC 10801. But there's a statute that requires every state to have a protection and advocacy organization. So we call that a PNA. And it's not just a law firm. We're not just a law firm, but we have a higher level of authority. And I'll say a little bit more about that in a few moments. We can go to the next slide. So our mission statement is to protect and to advocate for um, individuals with disabilities so that they can live free from abuse, neglect, discrimination, and segregation, as we heard a few moments ago. We have to understand that the range of disabilities, there are visible disabilities, but there are unseen disabilities as well that the people cannot readily see. What we're going to do as we focus in this presentation on emergency preparedness, we're going to be asking ourselves constantly, how does this play out during an emergency or during a disaster? Just to give you a very, very quick background on why disability rights is so important. For a long time, people didn't think that it was important, but back in 1976, something very remarkable, something very negatively remarkable, I would say, happened. There was a disclosure of inhumane treatment of people with disabilities in an institution. They were piled up into the institution, no clothes. They were basically treated worse than animals. And this became public. It gave rise to government support for the rights of people with disabilities. But you'd be surprised that there is still abuse going on today. And there might be individuals in your community, might be individuals that you might even know about that are enduring abuse right now. So let's move to the next slide as we look at very briefly what a PNA is, protection and advocacy. What it means is that we have a certain unique level of authority. We're not just a law firm. We have what we call investigatory authority that normal law firms don't have unless they file a legal case and then they engage in what we call discovery. But we're able to find out what's going on and what needs to be fixed. And I'll just leave that alone. I don't want to go too much detail about that. But the question that you might be asking is, how do you define disability? How is that defined? And the short answer is that there's a general definition, the ADA definition, but you have to be careful because sometimes different laws have different nuances in how they define a disability. But the ADA defines it as a physical or mental impairment that substantially limits one or more life's activities, or a record of that type of impairment, or if it's perceived by others as having, if a person is perceived by others as having such impairment. Why is this important? It's important even in the context of emergencies and disasters because sometimes you might be asking for certain services, you might be asking for a reasonable accommodation, which we're going to get into. The person might say, well, I don't think you need it. Why do you need it? Explain why you need it. Explain to me why you think you have a disability because I don't think you do. And this is where this definition comes into play. It's very important. As we move further on into this issue of disability, it's important for you to know also that we're part of a network. The reason why I mentioned that is that you might know someone in another state that might be going through a disability rights issue. And the question is, how can they get assistance as you might be aware of in Pennsylvania? Well, there is a network called the National Disability Rights Network. It's called NDRN, and all of the PNA organizations in the country are a part of that network. So all you'd have to do is to go to that website, NDRN website, and find out where the PNA is in that state. All right, we can move to the next slide. So, how do we assist? And it's important for us to understand how you might obtain assistance at DRP because a lot of the other organizations, a lot of the advocacy organizations, they operate in the same or similar ways. So, we have intake, what we call intake. People call in at no charge to talk about either their situation or they call in to talk about someone else's situation, maybe their son or their daughter, or even a friend they might be seeking information about. So we provide different what we call levels of intervention. So we provide, for example, one level of intervention, a basic level, might be providing information about rights, information about laws. That's one level. We might also provide information about resources that are available because as a PNA, a lot of organizations are in touch with us. They provide information to us. And one of the things that we'll find out, not just in an emergency, but in general, is that as you call an organization, an advocacy organization, even though they might not have the information or they might not have be able to provide a service, they might know someone else that might be able to provide service. So someone saying it's not us, that's not the end of the discussion. The next question should be, do you know someone else that you might be able to put us in contact with? And so we're very, very connected. We can provide information about resources. We network with a lot of organizations again. And then another level of intervention is providing informal advocacy. What does that mean? Sometimes we're able to actually reach out to the organization or the person that perhaps is giving you a hard time. We're able to talk with them over the phone. Perhaps send them a strongly worded letter that outlines what the law is. And sometimes even we're able to file administrative complaints, and engage in administrative hearings. For example, you may have heard of certain benefits that people might have, and when the government terminates those benefits or decreases the level of those benefits, you're entitled to actually have that heard. So that's an administrative hearing, and sometimes we are able to get involved in those types of hearings as well. Another level of intervention is referring you to other advocates, other organizations, and sometimes even other attorneys, because we have a list of attorneys that provide specific areas of service, just like you have doctors that might provide certain specialized areas of service. You have attorneys that also do the same, and some provide special education. They specialize in that area of law. Some provide services as it relates to housing issues and things like that. So we're able to provide that type of referrals. And then, of course, the most intense level of intervention is litigation, where we'd actually file a formal legal case in a state court or in a federal court. One other area of intervention, which I don't want to forget to mention, is investigation and monitoring. So with sufficient reason, we can, under the authority that we have, walk into any institution and demand to see what's going on and demand to see records if there's certain things that rise to certain levels of suspicion that comes to our attention. And then finally, we also do education and outreach like what I'm doing right now. So we can go to the next slide, please. Okay, so I just want to talk about the different areas of disabilities because it's important for us to understand how broad this area of disability is. Very, very broad. So you have, as you see on the screen, developmental area that covers issues such as learning. cognitive issues, cognitive learning that deal with how the brain is functioning. You also have assistive technology, anything that's used to assist a person with disability, a wheelchair, perhaps the brakes on the wheelchair is not working right. Perhaps the wheelchair needs to otherwise be fixed. You also have issues like barriers to employment for Social Security beneficiaries. So a person might need a reasonable accommodation at work in order to obtain or in order to keep a job. You have issues like voting accessibility. They can't get to the polling place, or even when they get there, they can't access what they need to access in order to properly vote. We deal with those issues as well. We also deal with what we call a representative payee. We call that rep payee for short. A person might be receiving Social Security benefits or Social Security funds, and another person might actually receive those funds for the person with disability in order to use it for their benefit, but the person might be misusing those benefits, perhaps not using it in the appropriate way for groceries, but perhaps using it for themselves and so forth. So we can get involved in those types of cases as well. We can move to the next slide, please. Okay, so let's talk about now the many federal laws that protect people with disabilities from discrimination. This is important uh, because even in the context of emergencies and disasters, it's important because someone may ask you as you go for assistance, as you go for help, someone may ask you why you say that you're entitled for what you're asking for. And so it's important for you to have certain keywords. You don't have to be an expert at it, but for you to at least have a general knowledge that these laws do exist. Because I'm telling you, when you're talking with someone and they're trying to sum up whether or not you really know what you're talking about or not, or whether you have any type of backing to what you're saying, if you start mentioning these types of laws, it's going to change the way that they're actually thinking about your presentation. So you have the Rehabilitation Act of 1973. You have the ADA, which we reference, the Americans with Disabilities Act. You have the Fair Housing Act, the FHA. You have what we call the Individuals with Disabilities Education Act. We call it for short IDEA. And you have many others. It's important to realize that also states might have their own laws. There's specific laws that protect people with disabilities. For example, in Pennsylvania, a state law that we use very often, and it'd be very, very important for you to become accustomed to this one because it has a wide reach. It's a Pennsylvania Human Relations Act, PHRA. That's a very, very useful tool in enforcing disability rights. And also, local municipalities also might have their own laws that protect disability rights as well. Again, this is important because this is a very important concept. Disability rights are not waived during emergencies or disasters. I'll say it again. Disability rights are not waived somehow because there's an emergency or disasters going on. They actually become more important. They're very, very important, especially in the time of a disaster. So let's move to the next slide and let's talk a little bit about these laws. We're not going to spend too much time on them, but let's talk about the Rehabilitation Act of 1973, the first federal law prohibiting disability discrimination, Section 504 of that act. It prohibits discrimination against people with disabilities in programs and services that are receiving federal funds. And you'd be surprised the amount of programs and activities and organizations that are actually receiving federal funds. It's very, very broad coverage, again, because so many entities receive federal funding. There's actually a website out there I can't cite chapter and verse, but there's a website out there that you can actually plug in the name of the organization to see if they're actually receiving federal funding. But for example, state and municipal governments The K through 12 schools is another example. Many colleges and universities, those colleges and universities that might not be subject to the IDEA, but they certainly are receiving federal funds, so they would be subject to Section 504. And many hospitals as well. Many hospitals as well. Let's move to the next slide. Let's talk now about the ADA. Very, very popular legislation, very broad reach. It prohibits disability discrimination, prohibits discrimination based on disability. So the question then again is, how do we define disability? And it is a physical or mental impairment that substantially limits one or more major life activities or major bodily functions. Or it could be a record of such an impairment, or it could be being regarded as having such an impairment. For example, there could be like a history of heart disease. There could be discrimination after a rumor of such disability. So there could be a rumor of such disability and then discrimination that results, and that would also fall under the ADA as well. So you have different titles, and I'm not going to get too technical with this, but you have Title One, one part of the ADA, which applies to employers with 15 or more employees. So it prohibits discrimination against employees and applicants with disabilities. So you could be an employee that you're already hired, you have a disability, and you need a reasonable accommodation. Or you could be applying for a job and you have a disability. This would still apply. It requires a reasonable accommodation to be made. Now, the sticky issue will be, is it reasonable? Is that accommodation reasonable? But for the purposes of this presentation, it requires
Whoa.
a sorry, was there someone that asked a question or just someone off mute?
Yeah, sorry. Someone was off mute temporarily.
Okay. All right. And so, yeah, it requires making a reasonable accommodation. Title II now of the ADA, it applies to state and local government. So this is, again, a very, very broad reach. It requires reasonable accommodations to be made to ensure access to government services. And this certainly applies to emergencies. This is very, very key when you talk about emergencies and disasters because you have state and local government that are going to be very, very active in the context of emergencies and disasters. It requires, for example, effective communication, as we're going to talk about. That's certainly applicable to emergencies. It requires accessible buildings and other types of modifications that's certainly applicable to emergencies. And Title III, then, this third section of the ADA, it applies, this again is even broader now because it applies to places of public accommodation. That's a term of art there, very, very broad. Anywhere basically where a business or organization is inviting the public into. So it applies to restaurants, hotels, stores, a lot of organizations out there, and it requires effective communication, accessibility, reasonable accommodation, modifications, and we're going to get into a little bit of the difference between the nuance between reasonable accommodation and modifications, accessible standards for buildings and things like that. And so again, this is applicable when you're talking about emergencies and disasters because a lot of organizations out there are providing services even during an emergency and during a disaster. Next slide. And so let's talk about now the FHA, another piece of law, the Fair Housing Act. It prohibits discrimination in transactions related to housing, including renting, home purchases, but it protects more than disabilities. It provides for people to request a reasonable accommodation and it also requires that the reasonable accommodation be considered and it should not be unreasonably denied. So it has to be considered, but then after it's considered, it can't be unreasonably denied. Now, if it's an unreasonable request, then that takes it into a different area. Um, so reasonable accommodation, how would you really think about that different than modifications? A reasonable accommodation you can think more of as a change in a rule or a policy. When we're talking about modifications now different statutes define it differently. Some of them just group it into a very large category. But in general, reasonable accommodation, change in a rule or policy. Modifications now is defined generally as a change to the physical premises, to the change to the physical premises. And so, in most circumstances, individuals are going to be required to pay for reasonable modifications themselves, but a reasonable accommodation usually does not have a cost because you're asking for a policy change. All right, we can go to the next slide. So let's talk about now education. We'll just spend a few moments on this. The Individuals with Disabilities Education Act, the IDEA. It requires that public schools provide students with disabilities with a free and appropriate education, a free and appropriate public education. We call this FAPE, F-A-P-E. The IDEA is very, very detailed. It's a very detailed statute. It also has regulations which apply principles in that statute as well. It also provides for services to younger children, what we call early intervention, EI for short. So, what does this have to do with emergencies and disasters? Emergencies can occur in educational settings as well. You can have natural disasters while students are at school. You can even have, as we've sadly seen in the news, you can have active shooters. And a lot of times, these natural disasters or emergencies require an evacuation plan. An evacuation plan, and sometimes it's not so much evacuating, but sheltering in place. But there has to be a plan that's in place. It's so relevant to emergencies and disasters. Now, in the education setting, there are many ways that you can handle disputes and enforce rights. You have informal mediation. You have formal mediation with the Office of Dispute Resolution. It's basically an organization that is in charge of handling education issues for the Commonwealth of Pennsylvania. Each state has one. They might not call them the Office of Dispute Resolution, but Pennsylvania, that's what we call ours, the ODR for short. Another way of handling disputes, a complaint with the State Department of Education, or a complaint even with United States Department of Education, Office of Civil Rights. And sometimes there are issues that fall outside of the IDEA, but are still within the four walls of the school that you might be able to address with the ADA as well. We can move to our next slide, please. So now let's talk about emergency preparedness issues as it relates to the individuals with disabilities. Let's start with FEMA, the central agency handling public disasters and emergencies. It's important to know these agencies because as you seek assistance, whether it's in emergencies or after an emergency, or even trying to prepare for emergency, people may refer you to these agencies, and you have to have a working knowledge of them. So FEMA is Federal Emergency Management Agency. It's the federal government agency, provides service to millions of people in the United States that are affected by disasters to recover. They have an agency, I shouldn't say agency, but they have an organization within under the umbrella of FEMA called the Office of Disability Integration and Coordination that focuses now on disability issues. So if you're dealing with not just a disaster, not just an emergency, but you're dealing with FEMA, but you're focusing on the disability issues, that's where you might want to focus on that Office of Disability Integration and Coordination. Now, I'll just say very quickly that There's been some talk about the future of FEMA, whether or not FEMA is going to exist or whether or not it's going to be as large. It's not certain. Bottom line is not is certain. But the important thing to understand is that FEMA is currently in existence and they are currently operating. Let's move to the next slide, please. Okay, I'm just moving my. Okay, on the state level now, instead of FEMA now, instead of FEMA, you have PEMA with a P. So that stands for the Pennsylvania Emergency Management Agency. This is the lead emergency management agency in Pennsylvania. They're in charge of coordinating Pennsylvania's preparedness, their response to and recovery from disasters and emergencies. They do receive certain funds from FEMA. They provide preparedness models now. This is important. They provide preparedness models for the local counties and the municipalities to follow. We've worked with them about a year ago, maybe a year and a half ago, on the latest model that's out there on the PEMA, which a lot of the counties and a lot of the municipalities will actually use as a model to formulate their own preparedness manual as well. Next slide, please.
Can I ask a question? Does
Sure.
does PEMA have any interaction with the Disability Coordination Office that's under FEMA?
I do believe they do. Exactly what interaction that they have, I can't speak to, but I do know they are very, very connected with FEMA and with all of their organizations under the umbrella of FEMA. It's a very close network there and communicating with each other.
So maybe would some of that knowledge be retained by PEMA, even if FEMA kind of scales back in the future?
I think you hit the nail on the head, and because that's one of the things that I personally have been thinking about and and have been looking into. If for some reason FEMA downsizes, it seems to me that the importance of PEMA will certainly grow, and not just the importance of PEMA, but PEMA would probably have to access some of that information that FEMA has to make sure that they have it, and then they would apply it to the Commonwealth of Pennsylvania. So I think you're certainly right on making that statement.
It's a little reassurance. Thank you.
It is. All right. And so let's look at the basic rights of people with disabilities in an emergency. These are specific areas, specific issues that people might face, specific issues that should be addressed by providers of care during an emergency, during a disaster. You can see from the slide that we have evacuation plan, inclusion, and accessibility. That's very important. You see also effective notification and communication for people with disabilities. You see also access to shelter and temporary housing. You see also access to healthcare, social services, and recovery services. This is very important for you to understand these four general areas because, again, when an emergency hits, when a disaster hits, it does not mean that the rights that you have, excuse me, I think I'm going to just cough right now. It does not mean that the rights that you have are suspended. They're certainly not suspended. They become even more important. And I would also argue that these four areas are not exhaustive. They're certainly not exhaustive, but it's important for you to have this as an outline in your mind because in an emergency, if you're facing an evacuation situation, you should be able to say, all right, there's certain rights, there's certain protections that should be in place in Pennsylvania. So with that, let's go to the next slide, please.
Are you looking for a different slide? Because I think some of them Melanie was saying maybe aren't in the same order as what you were talking about. So is there a different slide you want her to find?
I think this, I think that's the correct slide right there
Okay,
that says
great,
Title II of the ADA.
great.
That's perfect because what I was going to say is that before we get into those four areas, we have to understand that when we consider disability rights in a public emergency, the laws that we mentioned before come into play, especially the ADA. Again, this is so important for me to stress that they are not suspended. So don't let anyone tell you, well, we're in emergency. So because we're in emergency, we can't provide X, Y, and Z service to you because that's not what the law is. So again, you have Title II of the ADA, which prohibits disability-based discrimination by public entities. I went through a little bit of that before, so I'm not going to read all of that. Section 504 of the Rehab Act prohibits disability discrimination by recipients of federal funding. And so we can go now to the next slide. So let's look now at our first area of the four areas of rights during a public emergency or disaster. And this is the evacuation plan, inclusion, and accessibility. Again, the duties of public entities and recipients of federal funding under the ADA and the RA, Rehabilitation Act, extend to their emergency and disaster preparedness programs. As you apply the ADA and the Rehabilitation Act in general in a non emergency situation, the same laws apply to their obligation not just to provide assistance during emergency or disaster, but even before that emergency or disaster hits, to have certain plans and programs in place, but not just to have the plans and program in place, they have to be adequate plans that actually are going to not discriminate against individuals with disabilities. So that's very important. They have to ensure emergency evacuation plans meet the needs of people with disabilities. They have to provide evacuation assistance. They have to provide accessible transportation and accommodations. Some people with disabilities may be able to evacuate independently or with the assistance of family or friends. Others may not be able to get to safety without further assistance. For example, people with mobility disabilities may need assistance leaving a building without a working elevator, maybe because of the emergency, the elevator is not working, or the assistance of mobility devices such as wheelchairs, canes, or walkers, and things like that. And also, people that are blind or who have low vision may not be able to independently use the orientation and navigation methods that they normally use. Another example is that a deaf person may be trapped somewhere and unable to communicate with someone because the only available communication device relies on voice. We can move to the next slide, please. So the question is, what should these entities do? Public entities should have plans in place to address the unique needs of people with disabilities that they face in evacuating their residence, their workplace, or other location in a variety of conditions during an emergency. So those plans should include transportation for individuals with disabilities, such as identifying accessible modes of transportation. For example, lift equipped vehicles to be used to evacuate people with mobility disabilities, and ensuring that accessible transportation even has the capacity to be able to evacuate the people with disabilities that are at the shelter site, for example, and things like that. How people with disabilities can access individualized assistance for evacuation of themselves is another issue. Equipment or supplies that they might need that has to be looked into. Portable oxygen, portable toilets, communication devices. How can these things not just be transported, but if some of them are empowered by electricity, how can if they run out, how can they actually be maintained? So ensuring that those involved in evacuation process understand the need to provide reasonable accommodations. So basically, if you have a staff, that staff has to understand the plan as well. They have to understand the needs of the disability community. We can move to our next slide. So let's look at our second area out of the four areas of rights during a public emergency disaster. This is effective notification and communication during an emergency. So people with disabilities have different types of communication needs. People who are deaf or hard of hearing cannot hear sirens. They might not be able to hear the sirens or other audible alerts or spoken language that's on TV or radio or even on the internet. People who are blind or have low vision, they can't see the visual cues, such as the flashing lights. This is an important one, people with cognitive disabilities, they might have difficulty comprehending information that's not presented in plain language. And that's one area that gets overlooked a lot. Let's move to our next slide, please. The ADA and the Rehabilitation Act, the RA, require that public entities ensure that the emergency notification methods and the systems they use are effectively communicated to people with disabilities. The public entities should really use a combination of emergency notification methods and systems. So, for example, you combine visual and audible alerts. You use auto dialed text, telephone, TTY messages, use qualified sign language interpreters. You ensure that any written or oral communication is delivered in plain language. Let's move to the next slide, please. Also, effective notification and communication includes having alternative accessible formats for written and online emergency. For example, placing written materials in Braille and large print or other audio format. So I think I'm going to move quickly because I want to make sure I get to the other areas as well. So we can move to the next slide, please. Let's look at our third area out of the four areas of rights during a public emergency or disaster. Locating a shelter or temporary lodging during a public emergency. This is a huge issue, very, very important. The predictability, and this is what a lot of people don't understand, the predictability of shelter locations prior to a disaster is difficult. We've tried to see if we can pin down and find out exactly what would be the locations. It's very difficult because sometimes the type and extent of the disaster will determine the location of the shelter. So it's important to understand that the Pennsylvania Department of Human Services, DHS, is in charge of coordinating in a public disaster. In a public disaster, the management and staffing is most often handled by the American Red Cross. So you see the difference. The DHS has the general coordination, but when it comes to management and staffing, that's normally where you see the American Red Cross at play. In a public emergency, the ways to find information, so important here, is to call 211 or to visit the PA 211 website or to visit the Red Cross website or even to download the Red Cross app that they have. They do have an app out there. Next slide, please. So, what rights do individuals with disabilities have regarding shelters? We know that Title II of the ADA, we talked about that before, prohibits disability-based discrimination by public entities. Title III, of course, is dealing with places of public accommodation. We can move to the next slide, please, where we get to the meat of. The specific rights regarding shelters and temporary housing, accessibility, the ADA's accessibility criteria, it governs all parts of a shelter. We're talking about the drop-off location, parking lots, registration areas, entrances, accessible routes to and within the facility, living spaces, dining areas, bathrooms, all of the areas. Let's talk about the eligibility criteria. The shelters are usually grouped into two categories. It's important for you to understand this. Mass care, which is serving the general population, and medical care, which is serving the higher individuals with a higher medical need. So people with disabilities should generally be allowed to use the mass care shelters. Why? So that they can be housed with their families, friends, and neighbors and non-disabled people rather than forced into the segregated area, the medical shelters. Now, if it's medically necessary, that's a different thing. But if it's not medically necessary, again, the law it requires that you be in the most integrated setting, and there are certain reasons for that. It's can be said to be a little bit more we would argue safer to be in that integrated setting as opposed to be in a segregated setting unless it's determined that it's medically necessary. Service animals, the ADA and the RA generally require that shelters allow service animals. Why? Because a service animal is not a pet. It's not, this is the argument that you would use. It's not a pet, but it's a medical device. And because it's a medical device, if you allow wheelchairs in, if you allow crutches in, you have to allow the service animal in. Just make sure it qualifies as a service animal. Reasonable modifications and accommodations in shelters could include, for example, access to a quiet space for someone who perhaps has autism so that the disability won't be triggered with the noise and the people in that shelter location. So let's move now to our fourth and final area of the four areas of rights, and that is accessing healthcare, social services, and recovery services. Of course, there's always 911 for immediate attention, but outside of that, it's important to realize that DHS, the Department of Human Services, coordinates disability related needs, behavioral health services. You also have PEMA, that we spoke about before, which coordinates the general preparedness. You also have, and every county has one, an EMC, Emergency Management Coordinator, and they also have the Pennsylvania Emergency Preparation Guide Alert System. So there are a lot of these alert systems that are out there that you could sign up for you to get information. The Red Cross provides health and social services as well during an emergency and disaster. The Pennsylvania Department of Health, the lead agency for the provision of emergency medical services in Pennsylvania. Of course, you have FEMA, you have an organization called the Joint Commission, you have the Center for Medicare and Medicaid Services. The reason why these organizations are important is because when it comes time for filing a complaint or trying to enforce your rights, it's important for you to know what are the possible organizations that you can actually go to. And so, next slide, please. Let's talk and I'll probably spend just 30 seconds on this. How do you get relief? How do you self advocate? How do you try to help yourself when you're in a situation like this? The first thing is to obtain information about your rights. Disability Rights has a resource page, which we're not going to go through all of the slides on them, but if you go to our website, a host of information about the different areas of disability and your rights. But another way that you can advocate for yourself is by negotiation. First, try to talk with the individual that you're dealing with and try to see if it can be amicably resolved. Another way or another consideration is always have a paper trail. So even if you're orally talking with someone, back that up with an email or a letter saying, as per our conversation, you told me this. The reason why is that you want to prepare for the worst while you're hoping for the best. So you have to say in your mind, what if I'm in court? What if I have to file a complaint? I want to have a paper trail to be able to show as evidence. You also have administrative complaints. Many federal agencies that we've mentioned, if you go to their website, they will have a complaint portal that you will be able to file a complaint. And a lot of them, the PHRC on the Pennsylvania level, the DOJ, and so forth, they will have the HUD, they will have complaint portals that you can actually access and file a complaint. Seeking assistance, that's another way you can advocate for yourself. Seeking assistance from an advocacy organization like Disability Rights Pennsylvania, but others as well. Formal litigation, of course, you can file a complaint in state court or in federal court. but beware of the statute of limitations. So you don't want to just spend all your time talking with the person and then time runs out. So I think I'm going to stop here. I think we're just about at the hour. The rest of the slides just shows a lot of the resources that we do have at Disability Rights, the ways that we can actually provide assistance. You'll also find on our website, and it's important for you to know that we have a free intake 1-800 number that you can call, doesn't cost anything, in order to discuss your situation, especially during an emergency. You can give us a call. We normally have hours during that time as well. So I think I'm going to pause here and just find out if there are any questions.
Thank you so much for all of that. And we will share the slides, and also we will be posting the recording on our website so people can review the information. I think one of the questions I know I have, you had, I can reshare the slide where you talk about the different agencies that kind of oversee a response. Um, is there one in particular that you suggest for people to go to first if they're trying to be proactive about understanding what's in place? Would it be the county EMC if they're
I
wanting to
think
understand what's in place for their local area?
I think you can't go wrong with the EMC. You can't go wrong with PEMA. And certainly, if someone were to get in contact with PEMA and they wanted to refer you to a particular county-based organization, they would be able to do that. But I think the EMC certainly would be one of the first organizations that we would point people to. And a lot of it. And I noticed that you said if you just want to find out what's in place,
Mm-hmm.
because what I was going to say is that who you actually talk to depends on the particular issue that you're facing. But if you just
Mm-hmm.
want to find out in general, I just want to make sure that things are in place. I think that would be certainly a good place to start. And they might actually talk with you and say, well, what specifically, what areas are you concerned about? But I think that would definitely be where you start.
Mm-hmm. So things like where a shelter might be in your region. I know you said that can be hard to predict, but if you're trying to get a sense of what they have set up, that would be
Definitely think that's
where you
where
might
you should
start.
start.
Great, great. Do you have questions from anyone else?
I
You're
think there
welcome
might be
to.
some in the chat.
Sure. We've got a thank you for the presentation. There was a question at the beginning that wasn't specific to emergency preparedness, and I don't know if this is something you can even touch on today because it seems like it might be a lengthy answer, but I'll put it out there. Um, can you talk about the nuisance laws and mental health agencies discontinuing treatment because the applicant is difficult and cannot understand the appropriateness of their actions? So I think maybe they're referring to situations where police are called frequently, and then that can affect housing for folks. I'm not sure if that's something you can answer on here, but maybe if
Well,
there's resources you can.
I think that it's an issue that we are certainly aware of, and we're not the
Hmm.
only advocacy organization that's aware of those types of issues, and we're not the only organization that has a mind to actually do some work on that issue, do further work on that issue. But I would say that there are certain rights that are in place that we talked about. I think that if there's a specific situation, I would say for them to give us a call at our intake number and we can discuss specific situations because they're all fact sensitive, they're case sensitive. But certainly someone that has a disability, a mental illness, that's playing out, whether it's in the context of emergency or not, that should not be held against them, and they should be given all the protections of the law. And if they're not, then it's something that someone would want to look into DRP, whether it's DRP or another organization. And I would just say that give our office a call, our 1-800 number, intake number, and we would be more than willing to talk about that issue.
We also have a question. If an attendant doesn't show up and can't find help for the physical disability person, where to call first. So, Anne, are you saying in an emergency situation, if the attendant is not able to come,
Uh,
if are you
yes,
looking for suggestions?
yeah,
The attendant in what context? That's
Like
my
a
question.
home care
home care,
provider?
a regular home care person.
Hmm.
Just, this actually happened with the snow.
Mm,
And that's a
Sure.
whole other situation. But you know, he always needs someone with him.
hmm.
Sure,
And
and I think there are various ways that you could address the issue depending upon the specifics of the situation. For example, we mentioned in the healthcare portion, if it's an emergency, a dire emergency, or urgent situation, obviously the 911 would be the call that would be an option. I do understand that a lot of people have issues with the 911, maybe even alluding to the first question that we had. But outside of that, escalating to a supervisor, which you probably already thought about, depending upon the
yeah,
age of the person, the Adult Protective Services. So you also have your SILS, your Center for Independent Living. You have a lot, depending upon what the disability is as well. You might go a certain route if it's a mental illness that they're dealing with, if it's a physical situation, that might determine which route you go. But I think trying to escalate the situation if the person that's supposed to be there is not there, providing calling a supervisor and trying to see if you can escalate it. And then you also have community organizations that might be able to get involved if you can't get anywhere with that particular support organization. And then, of course, I would say calling DRP in our intake process, if we have a process whereby we can actually expedite certain responses if it's an emergency situation. So if a person called us and said, look, I'm supposed to get some assistance and I need it now, but the person is not able to help me, we would put that out of all of our intakes, we would put that at the front of the line and we would make sure that that person, based upon the fact situation, based upon the issues and the disability, is in touch with the appropriate organization or the appropriate support service.
I wonder, is there ever also a role, maybe not in that particular example, but reaching out to state representatives if there's situations where the state is maybe not meeting its obligations regarding a person's rights in an emergency response?
I certainly think that there is. And I think you touch on a very important point because when you're talking about disability rights, even in the context of emergencies and disasters, that's where the planning before and then the during and then the after is very key. And I think that you have to attack the problem from various angles. So one angle is making sure people have the appropriate advocacy organizations and services to be able to contact. But the other part is making sure that the individuals that are making laws and that are enforcing laws that have oversight are able to be aware of some of the difficulties that people are experiencing. And I know that there are various organizations, we've been in contact with a lot of them that are in touch with the government and civic leaders about this issue, not just on the state level, but also on the county level and the local level.
Hmm.
Those that are able to enact legislation to provide further protections and things like that. So I think you're totally right. It's just a matter of making sure that enough advocates are talking to these individuals and for lack of a better word, putting pressure on them so that they can understand the urgency of the issue that you just raised.
Hmm. Yeah, thank you. Yeah, I think part of what you mentioned earlier about FEMA was just bringing to the fore for me, as some things may be changing on the federal level, which Plan of PA will be, releasing education on, and you can always reach out to our care managers about, but um, there's opportunity to advocate on the state level for what the state is able to do to, retain care in the state. Although, of course, funding can be a challenge for that if the federal piece isn't there. But
And I will say this that in our experience, or I would say in my experience, there are a lot of people out there that are willing to have conversation. They're willing to have conversation. There are not a lot of people out there that are just closing the door when it comes to emergencies and disasters. We've come in contact with a lot of people that have said, let's sit down and talk, or send me an email what your issue is all about, and let's see. Now, the question is whether we're all going to agree on everything. That's probably not going to happen on every single issue. But I do know that the door is open to have that conversation, and I think that's really, really a good sign.
yeah, yeah, I would imagine it's a fairly bipartisan issue. Well, we so appreciate you speaking on this topic today and sharing about Disability Rights PA because it's a tremendous resource for folks to advocate for themselves. Um, I also just want to plug that we'll have more speakers coming up in February. We'll be talking about PA Able, which has had some changes to it in a positive direction. So we want to make sure we're sharing about where that is at. And we'll be sending out an e-blast on registration for that topic. And we will be sharing the materials from today as well. So thanks everyone for attending. And thank you, Morris Scott, for sharing your knowledge. And
Thank you for
hopefully
having
we'll,
me.
yeah,
Thank you,
absolutely.
Morris.
Thank you. Take care, everyone.
Sure.
Thanks a lot.
Thank you.